in the months leading up to the permanent awakenings that happened here, I noticed a real decline in seeking energy. And this wasn't coming from a wounded place, a deflated place like it had previously, where I just wanted awakening to be over. It was coming from what felt like the end of a chapter of it just closing out. And it felt actually good to put down seeking. And so I lost interest in the seeking energy. How it was playing out for me was all day and all night, just trying to get there, trying to finish the job, and just trying. That's all I thought about for about the 4 years or so prior to the permanent awakenings. It was this constant energy of what's the next thing to do? What's the next thing to work on? What's the next thing to look at? That energy itself is what started to deplete. And I just started to get to a place of just silence and rest and just enjoyment. And that happened very naturally. I wasn't trying to do that. And so, yes, there was still meditating going on, but I wouldn't have even called it a practice at that stage. There was just a call to sit silently. And that's pretty much all I was doing as far as practice at this stage. It felt like I had learned everything that I needed to learn, that I had tried everything, every technique, every trick that I could find, and done as much as I could possibly do. That was the sense, that the separate self had done everything that it could do to try and support this process. That was the feeling of it. And that felt like that had come to an end, and that I didn't need to do that anymore. And so very naturally, it was the seeking energy, that forceful, I must get it, I must get to the end. That's what started to drop away. And instead, I started to become interested in things other than awakening, and thought about different hobbies, and just thought about getting my life together, and enjoyment and pleasure, and things like that became interesting again, which was really a wonderful thing after so many years of very ferocious seeking and ferocious healing and just trying to get there. So that was a very significant and noticeable shift that happened in the months prior to the permanent awakening. And then in the weeks, the couple of weeks leading up to the permanent shifts that happened. And now this is probably coming up about 5 years ago now. So I'll try to remember it as best I can. It's interesting. The longer you're awake, the less you can remember what happened prior to awakening. That state of consciousness, you actually lose the memory of that. So I figured I better talk about it before I forget it completely. So in those weeks leading up to that, there was this it was really intuitively driven. And so there had been great peace, and I felt like I was awake most of the time. I could tell it wasn't complete, but I was in the position of awareness just naturally. I wasn't being triggered very often. I felt as awake as I'd ever been. Everything felt very peaceful and still. I was enjoying life. I was happy. And I thought, well, if this is as far as I ever get, then this isn't so bad. I feel quite happy now, even though I know I didn't achieve enlightenment. I feel happy, and I can live quite peacefully from this. So I'd kind of surrendered the awakening path. And if I ever got there, I'd given that up and was just enjoying myself. And then there was like this final push that happened over the last couple of weeks, where it was like everything that needed to be looked at before this shift could happen, all of it was going to come to a head at this point. And so the types of things that was, and so here I was just really basically in bed. I had the intuition that this was happening, that it was finally going to happen. And so I stayed in bed and just thought, I'm not getting out until this is over with. And so I stayed mostly in bed for this period of time. I was quite ill and I wasn't working. And so all of these different factors led to this moment in time where this is what was happening for me. So this isn't going to happen for everyone, but this is just how it played out for me. And so I could feel like this, it was very important and that I needed to just focus solely on the final part of this unraveling for this shift to happen. And so I was just sleeping a lot and going from just different visions to dreams and not really losing touch with what was real when I was awake, when I was asleep. I was really losing touch and just surrendering to that process. And I knew I was safe in my bedroom, so that I could do that. And I had great trust in awakening by this stage of the process. And so I was being shown so many things that I couldn't even remember now, but it was a lot to do with showing me that what reality was, and it was showing like the world collapsing, and just showing I would stand in front of the mirror and it would show my face turn into a skeleton and then just dissolve completely, and then there would just be emptiness there. And I would be having these realizations like back to back, like that is what emptiness is. You're not there. There's nobody there. So although I'd been having all these different realizations over, over a decade that I'd been seeking, these were the most potent realizations in these 2 weeks leading up to it. It was like getting to the core of the realizations that I'd had so many times before. It was like I really got them. It was at the core of it. Like that's what emptiness is. Like there's literally nobody here. And so I found it very fascinating. Some people might find it scary, but I really enjoyed the process. It just felt like a complete unraveling that I'd fully surrendered into. And there were some key parts to identity that I hadn't faced completely that wanted to be faced. And that happened in these 2 weeks. And so there was a big part of seeing past lives and how that had played out into the identity, which was a big part of my own awakening process, but is not for everyone. But also, it's like the certain things that had been missed through the awakening, everything was addressed in these final 2 weeks. So it would show me random past lives, a lot to do with worthiness and feeling worthless. That was there were sort of two big themes that were being played out that wanted to be looked at. And that was the core of the identity structure. So the emotion would be shame, the pattern would be worthlessness, and also to do with love as well. So these were the two big patterns I was working on to do with love. So the identity was that I'm a woman that needs to be in relationship, that needs to be loved by others. That was an underlying part of the core identity that broke. I saw that I'm not a woman. There's no person here, which was interesting because I didn't think that I was attached to being a woman, but it showed me that that broke. And then that, and that I didn't need to be loved by anyone, that I already was love. It was a fantastic realization. It was so liberating. I felt completely free with that. And that was one of the last realizations I had before permanent awakening happened. And then with the worthlessness, there had been a big journey within my awakening path of healing self-worth and starting to feel worthy from a more therapy point of view. And what that had done is created a good sense of self-worth after feeling unworthy from childhood trauma. But for awakening, it was saying, okay, now let go of all of that whole concept of worth. You're ready now. So I had to go through that whole journey of developing self-worth to only then let go of the whole idea of worth being a concept that you could even be worthy or unworthy. And so how that played out is visions and past lives and dreams to do with where I felt unworthy and revealing that to me in quite painful ways that I found very interesting. And until it really felt like I had felt all the way through that I felt that I was unworthy and also worthy. And then it's like that whole concept of worthiness collapsed. So for me, the two key components were self-worth and to do with needing love that were creating the core of the identity structure, and they collapsed completely in those final couple of weeks before the permanent awakenings happened. So once that had all been sorted, and it was really the bottom of the barrel type stuff, I'd been working on this stuff for a decade, and it was right the last real core. It felt like the core of the identity structure was seen and collapsed. And then it just felt like there was nothing left. There was just peace. It didn't feel completed, but there was just a peacefulness, a harmony. I got out of bed. I started to move on. And I just intuitively felt like watching a video of Adyashanti's. And I just picked the first one that I saw where he was looking at the camera, and immediately everything dropped away. And all that was left, it was like white light. And there was just his eyeballs just boggling around until they disappeared. And I disappeared. And I realized I am that. Whatever this is, this white light, this ineffable, whatever I thought he was, I'm that too. That's what I am. And so it was a mystical experience, and it was a permanent realization of I am that. And so after that completed, and I sort of came out of that, then later on that day, I went for a drive, and just sitting behind the wheel where many awakening experiences happened for me in the past, I had the permanent mind awakening. So this is where I woke up. So I was driving, and the mind just started to drain out and just kept draining and draining. And I'm not sure how long it went for. It felt like perhaps 20 minutes. It was a long time. It felt beautiful. I felt I'd never been so empty before. And the mind just kept draining and draining. And then it just stayed like that. It just stayed empty. And the mind from that point onward, was awake. And then 2 days later, I felt like I should attend my Zen class, even though I knew that this was permanent. I could tell that the mind was permanently awake, but something in me knew to attend my Zen class. And so when I did, things were operating a little bit differently that day. And it was a lot more intimate than it usually was. We were usually spread out across a bigger room. But for some reason, this time we sat in a really small circle. And something about the intimacy that was needed for the heart awakening to be completed for me. So as soon as I started the meditation in this close circle with other people that were there for the same reason, for liberation, something about the purity and the intimacy of that, opened the heart, and it just kept opening indefinitely. Spiritual heart expanded and included everything in it. So it was saying, these people, I'm those people, and I'm the room and the street, and I'm absolutely everything. I'm the world, I'm the universe, and beyond. I'm absolutely everything. That's me. But it was the heart that was doing that. It was saying all of it is me. And then it stayed open from that moment onward. And so that's what we could call being awake on the level of the mind and the heart. And then another journey began from that moment onward of integration. And that's a different story that I've talked about before. But they're the main points of what led up to these permanent awakenings. Of course, each person's journey is going to be different. It's a large part about identity. So really, what is at the core of your identity structure? That would be the question to ask. What could it possibly be? What are the most painful parts to you, the most wounded parts, the parts that have been with you from life after life, if you have looked at past lives? So those themes that I had, they had been with me for perhaps hundreds of lifetimes. I saw over 100 lifetimes. And that same theme was, those two themes were playing out, that I need to be loved by others and that I'm unworthy. And so that was how this identity structure, everything was built around that. And that was at the core of it. And after working through every single layer and chipping my way down to just what the core was left, that's what was seen in the last 2 weeks, and just completely deconstructed in the most interesting way. And I was always a very sort of mystical person with big visions. So for me, it was very mystical, very shocking, very big spiritual experiences, which is not like that for everyone. But that is how it played out for me. And I truly enjoyed it. I hope I can recollect it for as long as possible. And I hope that me sharing this helps you in some way.